All right, welcome to my squeaky chair and PacWest Bigfoot. This is kind of an interesting day, an interesting Friday today. I just wanted to say that after this particular based on true Bigfoot encounter story from PacWest Bigfoot from myself here, um, I want you to hover over the video and you'll look up there in the right hand corner, there's a little eye there. After 2 years, I have decided to step out in faith and with the, I guess, the requests of yours to start something amazing. And hopefully it's amazing for you. So what I want you to do is, I got another short little video for you. After this, I want you to hover over, click on there, and take a look at the PacWest Bigfoot clan. It starts today. Okay, so with that, however, let's get into this week's based on true Bigfoot encounter story from PacWest Bigfoot. I love this one. This neck of the woods up there is just a beautiful place to be. I have driven through there. I wouldn't mind living in this particular part of God's green earth myself. It is just absolutely beautiful. So here we go. The Ghost of Grayland. Bigfoot haunts retired couple's home. We bought the house for the view, the garden, and the quaintness of the Pacific Northwest. What we never expected was a Bigfoot, even though we were warned. It's not that I ever believed in the subject of Bigfoot, disbelieved. I believe to a point like most folks today. But then again, everyone says that, at least until you see one for real. We did see one, the wife and I. And this thing was like a ghost at first. Here is our encounter story, Dave. The Ghost of Grayland. Grayland, Washington is all about farming. Cranberries, mostly. But there are other crops here as well. It was a local farmer's market that caught our attention years back upon our first visit there. It also sits near the ocean, and for two folks from Ohio originally, well, the mountains and the sea is where we wish to be. The East Coast was just too busy, but the Pacific Northwest, well, it is nearly perfect. I say nearly because there is one thing we do put up with: Bigfoot. At first we were really frightened, but eventually we knew the reason this one was out and about and frequenting the area. That kept us from worrying too much about it. But at first, we did. And we still keep our distance when it comes around. Anyway, we made a trip back here, in the late 1990s and loved it so much we said we would move there when we retired. So we did, not 10 years later. We found a house up a pretty long street, or drive it seemed, that backed many of the cranberry farms below. It had several acres itself and a garden so large that it needed a small mini tractor to help tend it and take care of it. Which, by the way, was truly a great thing, as we wanted to try our hand at raising a few things we could eat ourselves and bring to the farmer's market on Saturday. I guess you could say we wanted a hobby that paid for itself or more. My wife wanted corn, cucumbers, tomatoes, and even lavender to make those pretty little lavender bunches. Me, I wanted cut flowers and some herbs, which I had plenty of room for after all. The space for her needs, wants, and desires were fulfilled. So we came back, found the home we wanted, and headed out to sign the papers 1 month later. It was funny because that was the first time we'd actually met the current owners. And boy, did they have a zinger to tell us. We were literally almost at the front door when the husband and wife stopped us. They were really nice, kind, and smiled a lot. But the demeanor they carried seemed to be one of, well, nervousness and worry, too. They told us of they called him a neighbor at first. The wife and I did hear the stories before, and we thought it was possible, as I stated earlier, that Bigfoot could exist. But Bigfoot on the property we were about to purchase? No. That was not our thought. It was simply not possible. I have to admit we felt a bit sorry later about our dismissiveness of the conversation, and I even think at lunch we thought they were a bit crazy and weird about the whole thing, to be honest. I guess we could have kept the smirks and eye rolling out of it altogether, too. But what do you say when someone says something like that to you? I mean, really, not everyone believes in Bigfoot. We never scoffed at what they said, but we came pretty close, and for that, well, we are truly sorry. But we realized when they called it their Bigfoot, and I quote, their ghost of Grayland, well, they were correct. At first we thought it was a ghost. 3 months to the day. By July, we were feeling comfortable and relaxed with our new home, the view, and the garden/micro farm. Things had sprouted, grown, and were becoming fragrant and delicious all at the same time. We started attending the local farmers market as sellers by that time, not just customers and perusers on a Saturday morning. We were really feeling like a part of the community already. It was our 90-day move-in anniversary when we thought a ghost was about the property. There were literally ghostly happenings around and about the grass and garden areas. Not to mention a few things, garden tools to be exact, that were strewn about and not where we left them. My wife headed out that early morning with some iced tea in hand. It was pretty warm out that last bit of July, even that early. Not a minute later, she came running back in wondering what I'd done with the gardening tools. Of course, knowing I'd put them where they go next to the outbuilding, I told her that is where I put them. But heading out to see what she was talking about, I learned that all the shovels, hose, and some other smaller tools were tossed all over the place. I found one shovel back by the tree line almost 20 yards away, and a rake near it as well. Everything else was close by, but none of it was where I'd put it the night before and every night previous. Something or someone literally tossed and threw our stuff all over the place. We were both a bit irritated at the fact, but bygones be bygones, we picked up the mess and headed back inside. It was half an hour later she saw the impressions in the grassy edges around the garden. It looked like footprints. Not that you could see toes in the grass, but you could see the shape of a foot, a really big foot. My wife started thinking about what the previous owners had said, and I simply, scoffed at the idea at that point. Personally, it was a person walking around trying to steal some food from the garden and make it look like an animal got into everything. That night, my wife was pretty vigilant, hanging around the back porch, or patio actually, just staring into the garden as the sun went down, waiting for the Bigfoot to show up. Nothing showed up but a few deer to eat around the edges of the garden before darkness took over. The August mists. It was amazing to have and feel such a cool August. Ohio was always hot and very humid that time of year, really hot sometimes. Some say it was like that in Grayland from time to time, but we could not tell. By the middle of August, it felt like early fall to us. Misty mornings covered many of the farms below, and the cool low clouds gave a pretty moody and even mysterious feel to our property as it floated quietly through. The mornings were cool, the afternoons warm. We started harvesting much of the vegetables and other cut flowers that were in bloom and or ripe by that time. It was the morning of the 17th that stood out for me. It was the day I'd see a ghostly shape early in the morning from the kitchen window. Something that is etched in my mind to this day, even more so than the clear visual on that thing we'd had eventually. It was truly mystical, eerie, even surreal, to be honest. I got up, I got freshened up, I dressed, I grabbed a cup of coffee. I stood at the back door sipping that coffee until I burnt myself with it looking through the window. Literally. The form I saw through the mist had me almost spilling my hot coffee down my clean t-shirt and khakis. It stood as still as a statue, but I had no statue in that vicinity, nor anywhere else on my property. But there it was, a tall, dark shape just standing out near the edges of the vast garden in the middle of the mist. It was like a cover to a scary book or a movie poster for a thriller at the movie theater. All I could see was a massive shadow, human in shape but much taller, broader, and pitch black in color. I do not think it noticed me, but it seemed to be faced in the direction of the house and the garden. Suddenly, like a ghost through a wall, it turned and disappeared into the mists, towards the tree line, and from there into the forest. I woke my wife seconds after the fact. She knew it, and she made it known, in her own funny and cute way as always, that she was right, that in fact it was a Bigfoot after all. I was still on the fence about it being a Bigfoot, but what I saw was, well, I had no idea at the time, but Bigfoot was the best explanation we had, for what it could have been. And it was a Bigfoot for sure, we'd learn not a few weeks later. The shadows of fall. That morning had changed everything for me. I finally found myself diving into legends, tales, and even some research books on the subject of Bigfoot. I had also made a friend of a local farmer who just happened to be part of one of the local Indigenous peoples in the area. His name he does not wish me to mention, but he allowed me to share a bit about what he knows on the subject. PacWest. It is what some tribes from the area had called this thing for hundreds or even 1,000 years or more. It was here, he stated, way before his people were. It was not a friendly giant either. However, it was neither a warring tribe as he called them either. But they were not to be trusted, as they were known to take people from time to time who got too close, or in its way, whatever that meant. PacWest was large, hairy, mostly tangled-like hair. Its colors ran as different as the flora in the forest that lived and roamed about, he said. They lived in clans, small groups. Most of the time it was no more than 3 to 10 or so in a clan or family. They hunted and gathered as his people did, but they had the early evening and the night and through to the first light of day. This was the time when his people would gather back into their own community during the day or the night and stay out of harm's way through the night. It was revered, and for some even worshipped by some of the shamans who would see these things as something between this world and the next, like a guardian of the woods, he supposed. He was not all that sure about that, but he believed they existed, and had seen twice within a month of each. Once while fishing from the shore along the coast, the other was near his farm while tending to it. The thing was stealing his cranberries. His description met mine to a perfect T, so I will save that description for a few here. But he mentioned over and over again to keep a safe distance from them, to not look at them directly in the eyes, and most definitely, if at all possible, do not even recognize they're even there. Even if you had eye contact, look away, back off slowly and out of the area. They move like shadows in the forest, he said. A ghost, more like it, I thought. Being followed. Summer ended and all the good stuff was picked, sold, or canned. It was a busy season, that was for sure. And now the work of getting things winterized was underway. I could still grow flowers and vegetables as I took some cash and built a pretty decent-sized greenhouse on the property. Out near the outbuilding we kept all the tools in. I was busy on the Ryder lawnmower all afternoon, and my wife was planting vegetables and some cut flowers for me in the greenhouse when we decided to take a break and a brisk walk. At that point, there had been no shadows or ghostly figures about the property, nor any other sign of Bigfoot being or hanging out around the area. September was, well, quiet. We stopped working, filled up our water bottles, and headed off for a small walk along the trails that led off the property and into the woods. And for those of you thinking that was insane with everything we'd seen and experienced, no, it was just a walk. Everything seemed just fine, or so we thought. The walk was great, and the trails back there, well, they really did head pretty far in. Eventually, after about a few hundred yards or so, they turned into more game-like trails than established ones. It was at the game-like trail point of the walk that we started feeling the sensation of being watched, and that went for the both of us. My wife said she was feeling a bit weird all of a sudden, and so did I. Without warning, something started, running through the trees, and we could see the silhouette. It was the Bigfoot, and it really did look like a ghost through the trees, a dark, massive, and menacing one. We practically crouched in fear, and my arms immediately covered my wife as this thing moved closer. Then suddenly, it stopped. I looked up and saw this thing leaning out from behind a tree. It was massive, and while I would not be able to see the whole of this thing, what I saw from about the waist up was massive. Its face was very much like a primate, but the eyes, they just seemed more human-like, which gave you a different feel for this thing, like it was all animal, but the most highly intelligent one ever. That's for sure. Its brown line was deep, and it created a very dark inset for the eyes, which were almost black, but had some whites to them, I remember. Its teeth, you could see, were blocked as it breathed in and out through its mouth. They were much like ours. This thing stood not 25 feet away from me, or us. His chest was huge. I mean, this thing had a chest that was the width of at least 2 decent-sized wine barrels for sure. It was covered in hair, even the face. The hair was gangly and looked like a real rat's nest, but it flowed and moved with the movement of the breeze. Speaking of breeze, it stunk. A really, really bad stink, too. It grunted, and my wife shuddered and even made a sound or two like we were about to die. That is not what I was feeling at the time. I felt scared, yeah, fearful. But I knew we would be okay for some reason. I finally remember what my friend had said. Do not look Bookwus in the eyes. I suddenly found myself staring down at the ground and then moving slowly, standing up and pulling my wife up at the same time. She tried to resist, but I whispered to go with it and stay with me. This thing grunted again, a deep and somewhat menacing grunt. But it did not move. It just stood there, behind a large Douglas fir. Finally, we were backing up, one step at a time. We turned and walked away, slowly, back to the house. We finally made it out of the woods, physically and proverbially. The ghost hunter. No, I'm not about to join some Bigfoot Hunters Club or research group, but I do know that these things do exist for sure. And along the Olympic Peninsula, they are all over the place, I hear. Once in a while, I still see the shadow. The last time was not even a year ago. I said nothing to it. I did not move. I just stared into the mist and watched as it turned and walked off into the forest. And yes, it took some vegetables with it. But that is our story, Dave. Thanks, Ben and Alice.